I'm going to go ahead and call the Transportation Committee meeting to order. We have had a request from the ranking minority member that because the treasurers are having funding issues, that everybody that attends today has to leave $20 with Steve Kearney, and Steve Kearney will make sure that it gets in the county fee fund for Seward County.
Wait, what?
All right, committee. I want to thank everybody for being here today. Representative Delperdang.
Thank you for having the floor for just a minute, Mr. Chair, but there's some faces in here I haven't seen before. And we've got a representative from AT&T. I think he's a vice president level, and I'd like to know who's sitting by him.
Oh, yes.
Welcome.
I thought that guy looked like he was from Moscow. All right. Committee, we've got a lot on the schedule today, so we'll get started. First item today is I need a motion to approve minutes for January 29th, February 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, 16th, 24th, 26th, 28th, March 2nd, 3rd, 9th, and 10th. Motion by Representative Helgerson, second by Representative Essex. Is there any corrections or additions to the minutes?
Do you want to take them individually?
No. We do want to get to the business we have to do today. We can't put it off. Okay. If there's no additions or corrections for the remaining minutes, we'll probably send them to you and have you kind of approve them by email, or maybe we'll do a meeting at the rail. So all those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Motion carries. Next on the agenda, committee, I want to take up the bill we heard yesterday, Senate Bill 404. Chris, could you please give us an overview?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee Senate Bill 404, if you'll remember, allows the county treasurer's division of vehicles or contractor division to charge certain increased fees for vehicle registration transactions. The bill would amend KSA-145D by allowing county treasurers, the division, or any contractor of the division to charge what's currently a $5 service fee, would allow them to potentially charge an amount not to exceed $15 for that service fee. In addition, the bill would also change what used to be a facility fee in that statute. It would rename it as a transaction fee and allow the county treasurer the option to charge any applicant for registration or renewals of registration an amount not to exceed $5. And currently that's the facility fee is anywhere from $2.50 to $5 right now. And the bill will take effect July 1, 2026. Happy to answer your questions.
Did you mention the sunset?
Oh, yeah. So sorry, Mr. Chairman. Yes. So the service fee has a sunset on it that was inserted by the Senate. That would be from July 1, 2026 to June 30, 2028. So that additional amount on the service fee up to $15 would be available to be charged during that time.
Hey, does anybody have any questions for Chris? Okay, seeing none, discussion on the bill. First off, I want to start out committee with I have an amendment. My first amendment, I think it's very important we have that sunset in there. We need to get to work and find a long-term solution to this problem. We need to modernize the system. And so I've got some language to establish a task force regarding that. So if you'll hand out the amendment, I'll go ahead and start explaining it to you. As it currently stands, there would be 10 voting members. Would be the chairperson of the Senate Committee on Transportation or their designee. We have most of these as designees. The House Chair of Transportation, the minority member of Senate Transportation, the minority member of House Transportation, one member appointed by the President of the Senate, one member of the Senate appointed by the Majority Leader of the Senate, one member of the House of Representatives appointed by the Speaker of the House, one member by the Majority Leader of the House, one member of the Kansas Motor Carriers Association, one member of the Kansas Automobile Dealers Association. We would have 4 ex officio members. It's important that we have all the parties at the table, I believe. One of those would be the Director of Vehicles at Department of Revenue. One would be a county treasurer from a county with a population under 15,000. One with a population between 15 and 100,000. And then one county treasurer from a county with a population of over 100,000. And one of the reasons for that is they all have very different needs. Representative Hoheisel? Yeah, let's wait till I get through.
Yeah.
So the members of the task force would be appointed September 1 of 2026. I want to let everybody get through primaries. And then the chairperson of the Senate Committee on Transportation or their designee, and then the House Transportation Chair would serve as co-chairpersons of the task force. Meetings would be held in Topeka. The majority would be a quorum. But the important thing is really what we are working on making their goal. One would be evaluate vehicle services related to the vehicle registrations and titling provided by the Division of Vehicles, county treasurers, and contractors of the Division of Vehicles. Make recommendations for methods to modernize vehicle services, including improvements to fee structures and payments and procedures for such services. Make recommendations for any statutory or regulatory changes necessary for implementation of such modernization methods. Study and evaluate or make any other recommendations related to vehicle services provided by state agencies or on behalf of the state. And then we would prepare a report on or before January 10th of 2028 to the House Transportation and the Senate Transportation Committees. And then the committee would expire on January 31st of 2028. And I'll take questions. Representative Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm supportive of this concept. However, the number of voting members is an even number at 10.
Yeah.
Does that present a problem for a tiebreaker?
Probably. But you know how that works. I guess if it ties, it's like everything else, it fails. Can't get a majority, it fails. Yeah, Representative Hoheisel.
Okay, and then the thought process of the Motor Carriers Association and Automobile Dealers Association, giving them voting powers on this. Is there any rationale behind it, or just
Well, I think part of the
representation from those industry?
modernization is to push some of those services onto those, and they're already dealing with some modernization things that haven't been done before.
Okay.
We made the we could make them ex officio too. I wouldn't care. I wanted to make sure that the legislature, that we came up with a product that we thought we could get through the process.
Okay, yeah, it's not a problem. I support.
Yeah. Yeah. Representative Vaughn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of things. If you did want 11 members on the task force, one option might be adding a member appointed by the minority leader of the House and the Senate. So a joint appointment to get to 11, that might be an idea. And then there was a quick typo, just subsection A, Director of Vehicles who shall serve as an X. Just a heads up on that. And then the last question, one thing we heard a lot about yesterday was the need to modernize technology. So I don't know if there might be room to add that on the back, section 2, possibly make recommendations for methods to modernize such vehicle services, including improvements to fee structures and payments and procedures for such services, and the technology needed to administer such services or something like that. But that might be something important to study as well.
Representative Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to follow up on her first suggestion. One suggestion could be, and I can't believe I'm saying this, it's going to come out of my mouth, is giving the governor an appointment. And that gets you to 11.
You know, one of the things that we'll have to deal with if there's a party change after the election,
Yeah, that's true.
how we want to handle handle that whole thing.
You said if. And
I
not
kind of looked at the vehicle person as the governor's, they're in the executive branch, but anyway, this is a conceptual start. So if somebody wants to make a motion, I mean, I'm free to debate, a settled change. We might pass this and then make amendments to the amendment. Yes, Representative O'Hobson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, just an idea, just to bring to the 11th person. Also, we can have someone, a representative from the local workers or local municipality union join it to be the 11th person.
I really think this is a thing that it involves, county government, the treasurer specifically, and state government. Yeah. So I really think we ought to, let's go ahead and pass this, and then if we want to address the 11th member, Representative Brunk.
I was just going to continue with the 11th member discussion. I'll hold that off since everybody else was opining about who that might be.
I want to go ahead and pass this, and then we can do a conceptual amendment on what we pass. Is that all right, Chris? Okay. Representative Delperdang.
Thank you. Just a quick question, following up on the representative a couple down from me, but on page 2A, what does the X stand for? Is that part of the ex aficionado, or is that an ex-member, or what is that? If I can get the revisor to define, thank you.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I apologize. That is just a typo. So it would just say Director of Vehicles, who is the ex officio member.
Representative Helgerson.
Mr. Chairman, do you want a motion?
Yeah.
I move that we adopt the balloon that's been passed out.
Is there a second? Second by Representative O'Hobson, motion by Representative Helgerson. Is there any other discussion? Representative Goddard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for clarification, this task force would be operating during the time frame that's described in the underlying bill 26 through 28, and it would not impact what the bill called for about setting fees, et cetera.
No, it does not affect that. The members have to be appointed by September 1 of 2026. They've got to have their first meeting on or before December 15th of 2026. We want to get past the general election because we'll be busy. And then it expires. It has a requirement to have a report submitted by January 10th of 2028. And it would expire January 31st of 2028.
Okay, so it all comes together with the time frame that's described in the underlying bill.
Well, we may have to discuss that time frame a little bit. We have to have time to implement any solution. So. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other discussion? If not, would you like to close on your, okay. All those in favor of the motion say aye. All those opposed, no. Motion carries. Okay, do we want to talk about the 11th member? Yeah, go ahead, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm prepared to actually make a motion on that. I'm going to make a motion, a conceptual amendment that we add a 11th member appointee of the governor that has to be within the Department of Motor Vehicles.
You want one in addition to the manager of the Department of Vehicles? She's already on there.
Is she a voting member?
She is not a voting
Let's
member.
make that a voting member.
You want to make the Department of Revenue
let's do that then.
member a voting member?
Yeah, let's make that.
Okay. Is there a second? Is that a second? Okay. Well, Division of Vehicles in the Department of Revenue. Yeah. All right. We have a motion by Representative Hoheisel, a second by Representative Hoy. Discussion on the motion. Representative Vaughn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My concern is what was previously alluded to. We don't know what party the governor will be next. And I do think that based on the list here, it would be appropriate to have one more minority appointment. Currently, it's only ranking minority member of the Senate who serves on the Transportation Committee, and then the ranking minority member of the House Transportation Committee. And then there are 4 majority appointments in addition to the chairs of both the House and Senate committee. So
You're opposed.
I am opposed. And
Representative Brunk.
Just for discussion purposes, as an alternative 11th person, I don't see anybody on here that deals with technology. And so this modernization will have to deal with technology and et cetera, et cetera. And so my suggestion would have been to have the chair of legislative modernization or his or her designee or someone from technology within the department. They're working at the state level to technologically combine institutions and also at the local levels to enhance technology back and forth between counties and state. So somebody with that kind of expertise seems appropriate to me.
Okay.
Sure, if I can follow up.
Representative Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll follow up on the to be resigned. I understand where Representative Brunk's coming from, agree with him almost 100%. The only thing is we don't know if legislative modernization is going to be a committee next year. We have a new speaker, a new whole regime coming in, so I'm not necessarily sure that committee stays around next year. So I'd be worried about putting that in statute. To Representative Vaughn's comments of we don't know who the governor is going to be next year. We also don't know who the chair of transportation is going to be next year. We don't know who the chair of the Senate Transportation Committee is going to be next year. There's a lot of moving parts with those as well. So while we, again, don't know who the governor is, by the time this board sits, we will know who the governor is. And we will know who, I assume, that the chair of House Transportation and Senate Transportation are.
I would say one thing in favor of the person that Representative Hoheisel describes as far as the manager of the Department of Vehicles. We're going to need to bring in technological expertise that is not in this building and not in the state currently. And I would also say that the manager of the Division of Vehicles is, I don't believe, generally a political appointment. So I think that there is some continuity in that position that wouldn't be in others. Is there any other discussion on the motion? We have a motion in front of us. If not, would you like to close?
Close.
All those in favor of the motion by Representative Hoheisel, say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The motion carries. All right, committee. I have another amendment that I would like to hand out. And that amendment regards spending policies on the Treasurer Fee Fund. Chris will hand it out. And I just want to tell the committee, this comes from my history as chairman of a county commission in rural Kansas. And there's always kind of been a little bit of this back and forth between the county commission, some of the other elected officials. And it got so bad that there was a Attorney General's opinion in 2015 over this issue. You know, where the authority goes for the appropriate expenditures of the money in this fund. And all this says is, because it's very important that this money be spent in the treasurer's office. That's what we're taking it from our constituents for. But it's also important that we have appropriate oversight on this. So this amendment says the special fund created for county treasurers pursuant to this subsection shall be expended in accordance with any policies related to expenditures for personnel, pay plans, or other budget-related policies for the operation of the county treasurer's office approved by the Board of County Commissioners. So the intent of this is that they have personnel policies at the county. The monies that are expended on this has to follow those personnel policies and pay plans. And also the spending policies. So like, for instance, if the county has a rule that says you've got to get 3 bids, they've got to get 3 bids. But the money stays there. It still has to be spent for the purpose for which it was taken for. And I'll make that motion. Can I get a second? Second by Representative Helgerson. And is there any discussion? Representative Helgerson.
Could you go in a little bit more detail, and I'll preface this a little bit. So the money is appropriated to the treasurer's office.
Yes.
And then the treasurers would, in all but 2 of the counties, would go to the county commission and propose what the budget is going to be for this, just these funds?
No, they'll develop a budget underneath the normal policy. What happens is they make a presentation to the county and then the county approves a budget. This is part of the funding of that budget. It just says that the funds in this fund, that as it stands right now, the treasurer has, can you read the language that the treasurer currently has regarding the expenditures of these funds, Chris?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So yeah, in that statute, it's in the amendment, you'll see it in that subsection B. And like third line down in subsection B, it says a special fund, which fund is hereby appropriated for the use of the county treasurer, division, or contractor, talking about the county treasurer, and paying for necessary help and expenses incidental to the administration of duties in accordance with provisions of this law. So the motor vehicle registration laws is what that's referring to.
And one of the issues it addresses, when I was a county commissioner, our county treasurer, this was before some of the new duties and the inflation kicked on, she would give bonuses to some of her employees that other people in the county were not getting. It was felt in some circumstances it was arbitrary. This just says they have to follow the same policies that the other employees in the county have to follow for personnel and purchases.
So the county commission will approve the recommendations of this funding,
Not necessarily. They'll approve the way it's spent.
the way it's spent.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Is there any other discussion? Representative Brunk.
Just in our county, which is a large county, our treasurer is elected and not necessarily appointed by the county commission. And so while I'm sure that they have a good working relationship, I don't know if it's appropriate in all counties to have that authorized by a county commissioner if the treasurer essentially works for the people as an independent office.
So it's your opinion that the treasurer should be able to spend those funds without proper bidding rules if they want to. They ought to be able to pay the employees in that area without regard to the other personnel policies?
I understand what you're saying. I think my opinion would be that there's not enough funding there right now to pay for employees that they need as opposed to paying. I mean, that's part of our problem here is that there's not enough money in the system to pay for the people that they actually need to do the function, as opposed to creating a slush fund. Just don't see that happening. But that was an observation, not a request or a change to the amendment.
Okay. Is there any other discussion? Representative Hobson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I kind of agree with what my colleague from Wichita has said. Some counties actually elect their treasurers, and we could actually see a collision where the county treasurer may be elected from another party versus the county commission may have a majority, and therefore you have a clash between the two. So I'm hearing what you're saying, and I just want to bring that to your attention as well, whereby there's going to be kind of like a standoff as to who has discretion over what to use with the money if they're being elected by the people of that particular county. So just want to bring that attention.
Right. And I think the language still applies to how the treasurer wants to spend it. It just says they've got to spend it underneath the spending policies and the budgetary policies and the pay policies of the county. And I think that's why it's very important to leave this money in here. We don't want this to become a slush fund where the county commission can take it for other projects. It's got to stay in this fund.
At the same time, we don't want a situation whereby you have the county commissioners kind of, inserting their will over the county treasurer because they're two separate, entities, in terms of their policy. So I hear what my good friend from Wichita, President Brunk is saying. So,
is there any other discussion? Representative Minix.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Seems like this who's in charge deal's been argued for the last 100 years or so here in Kansas. I I personally have noticed that in communities where the county commissioners have their responsibility to set up policies, and each of the duly elected department heads also work underneath those, whether it's bidding for materials or it's salaries, work underneath those policies. Everybody kind of has their lane. As long as they stay in their lane, they're fine until they violate their lanes. I like this amendment because it says where the buck really stops. If the commissioners don't like the way the treasurer's doing something, they can change their policies a little bit. And there's been several court cases in the past that have given various versions back and forth of how things work. I think this is the neatest and cleanest way, though. Thank you.
Is there any other discussion? If not, I'll go ahead and close on my amendment. All those in favor of the motion, say aye. All those opposed, no. Motion carries. Did I get a second? Yeah, Representative Helgerson. I think I had 2 seconds, actually. Representative Hoheisel did also. Yeah. All right. Representative Hoheisel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have an amendment. So as the amendment's getting passed out, I'll kind of explain my job here as a representative, but also serving as the House Majority Whip, and that's finding the votes to be able to pass something. And we can't afford to kick this can down the road another year. We have to get something done this year. But this amendment is intended to put at ease some of our folks who are worried about raising fees. And some folks on this committee even. So, but more so on the House floor. So what my amendment's going to do is get to two things. It actually takes is it the service fee? Is that what we were calling it? The option to go in from $5 to $15 to $5 to $10. So doubling that. And this also makes that subject to approval by the county commissioners and not the treasurer, based on the recommendation of the county treasurers and subject to approval of the county commissioners. I think this amendment is designed, again, to put some folks at ease so we can get something passed this year. Because just talking with folks in my caucus, they're very concerned about raising fees. I know it was brought up yesterday, raising fees on their constituents, especially in an election year. And the worst thing that can happen is us take this to the House floor and it goes down. Because we have to get something done this year. So that's my amendment. The county commissioner piece, I've gone back and forth on the issue that I brought up yesterday with the Wyandotte and Johnson County treasurers being not elected positions, but having that authority to raise fees. Kind of concerned me. To Representative Minix's point, the buck stops with the county commission. So that's why that piece is in here. And I'll stand for questions.
Yeah, and so this still has the 2-year sunset as it currently stands, is that correct?
Yeah, this amendment doesn't address the sunset.
Representative Essex. I was going to call you Representative Robin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I talked to plenty of treasurers and some other parties, and some wanted a 5-year, some wanted, they thought 2 years was insufficient. So I really, since we're on the subject of this amount of money, I think we need to be at 3 years. That's what I'd like to throw out there to add to the amendment.
Yeah, I definitely think that's a friendly tweak to this amendment. I talked to my county clerk, texted me yesterday when I was in tax committee, very concerned about the 2-year sunset. So if the committee's comfortable with 3 years, I will take that as a friendly update to this amendment.
So Chris, just for clarification, what would the dates need to be changed to?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So on the last page of the amendment, for the date range, it would be from January 1, 2027 to December 31, 2029 for when that increased fee could be charged. And then in that last sentence in that same box, saying like on and after January 1, the subparagraph expires and it goes back to the original amounts in subparagraph A. That would be January 1, 2030.
You're good with that change?
I am fine with that change. I was giving some thought to, do we then change the dates on the task force? But I don't believe we should, because we need to hold their feet to the fire and get a solution now, so.
I agree with you 100%. You know, I think it's going to take a while for that task force to come through, but then we're going to need implementation time of whatever solutions we come up with.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So I'm fine with that change.
Okay, does he have a second? Yeah, yeah. Okay, I have a second by Representative Essex. Representative Brunk?
So I'm not sure why we're expiring this increase in the fees if we're going to allow it by the county commissioners. Just case in point, back to the conversation that we had yesterday. I'll use my own county as an example. If they use this increased fees to be able to get good services, they're going to hire some people, they're going to expand the satellite operations, and then at some point this is going to expire, then they no longer have the funding that they need in order to be able to pay those people. So now if this expires, they're going to be laying those people off. We're not going to be providing the services that the people expect, and we're going to go back to the system of waiting in line with lines as described yesterday wrapped around the building. I don't see how expiring this fee of the county commission. So we already have the guardrail of the county commission being able to have authority to do this. And so if we expire, I'm repeating myself now, I apologize. If this expires, they're no longer going to be able to have the funds to pay the people to provide the services. So I would object to the expiration of this. And maybe I don't understand the rationale. I would certainly stand to be explained to.
No,
Yeah, would you
if I
like
may,
to
so, first off, the sunset's already in the underlying bill. It's not in this amendment. This amendment just actually takes sunset from 2 years to 3 years. So it's a little more permissive actually with supporting the amendment. I think the real true reason of the sunset is forcing us to address this issue. In that 3, or I guess in the 2 years, the underlying bill in 3 years, if we extend it a year, is forcing us to really address this issue with the task force. I don't honestly, myself, personal preference, I don't object to removing the sunset totally. That's just my personal preference. Just remove the sunset, give the county commission the authority to set the rates themselves, set the fees themselves. However, I do think that sunset in there forces us to take action in the next 3 years to fix this problem. And we can always come back in 2 years and punt the sunset 2 more years. You know, that sunset's not necessarily baked, as you know, Representative Runk, you've been here longer than most of us. Those sunsets just always get kicked down the road when needed. So I think that's the true meaning of that sunset, but the 2 years is already baked into the bill. And Representative Essex's tweak to the amendment would just extend it another year to 3 years.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I might, and so not quite baked into the bill because right now it's still a proposal and not approved. And so I think I objected to that sunset in the funding to begin with, and particularly now since we have that guardrail of being approved by the county commissioners. I'll repeat myself one more time and then walk away from this. But once those agencies hire more people and the citizens have become accustomed to better service, it would be quite the task to undo that a couple of years down the road.
I don't disagree with that at all. I don't disagree with that rationale at all. Would it be, how do you want to do this, Mr. Chair? Do you want to
Let's-
divide the question now and vote on the underlying
No,
amendment?
I tell you what, this came from the Senate. I know a number of people that don't even want to extend it to the 3 years. They don't want to do it at all. I think this is a necessary component to progress on the bill.
The 3 years?
Well, I think a sunset. I mean, we can argue about 2 years or 3 years, but I think that you'll see this bill start to not move if you do that. And I think it's important. I've been involved in this for like 7 or 8 years. I want to get something done. Representative Essex.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had some concerns too. I started talking to treasurers, and basically the explanation was, we don't know really what we need just yet. And so it could be just modernization. It could be we don't need the extra staff if we are more efficient with what we have. We don't know what that looks like yet. And honestly, if we have 3 years to look at that and they can say, well, maybe we don't need the 10, we only need an extra 5, or maybe it wasn't the extra personnel. It's just giving us a glimpse of what is needed to make sure it operates effectively. So like has already been mentioned, we can pass that, keep doing sunsets. We can take it off in the future, but we don't even know what we're looking at yet. And this just gives us the data and the information we need, gives us time for implementation. Just my thoughts.
Representative Helgers.
My feeling was you give the treasurers enough money to get by for a year or so, 2 years maximum. Because I don't think, you heard my questions, nobody could tell me what's the ideal system. That raises real questions in my mind. You don't know that the department couldn't tell me the answers. The treasurers can't say this is the best in the country. And we're struggling, and we're going to continue on in the same model. And the model works totally different. In rural western Kansas, it's totally different than Johnson or Sedgwick County. And we have to design a system that fits the two. I think this is going to be a hard sell right now. It's hard for me to swallow. And my guess is when you get to the floor, you're going to have a lot of other people. So my justification is we tell them this is a sunset because we want to find the best possible way of doing it in the most efficient way, and we get some answers from whoever's running the department. You know, and I say that whoever the next governor is, because they're going to make the recommendation if they're going to spend a computer system with 50, 60, 70 million dollars, or how are we going to, or if we're going to sub it all out and privatize it, which is a proposal from the Senate. So I understand that maybe we find the solution here, but I think we're a long way from finding the perfect solution.
Other discussion on the amendment. Representative Delperdane.
Thank you, Chair. Page 4, I'm just looking through the balloon portion here, but I'm got a question where it says it's may be increased to an amount greater than $5, but not more than $10. So are we, if I can pick on Sedgwick County Treasurer, because they testified the other day, but each $1 is worth roughly $500,000 or $500,000 for them. So we're going to force a $2.5 million minimum increase?
No,
Is that what I'm reading here?
That $5 is the $5 they can already charge.
Yeah.
Is that right, Chris?
That's the part.
That $5 is one they already charge.
So they've already got permission to that.
yeah.
So what you're really saying is not more than 10.
Yes, they can.
Is there a reason we just didn't say not more than 10?
Because they've already got the authority. The county treasurer right now can do 5 on their own without anybody's approval whatsoever. And this allows them to still have that power to do that 5. One of the things we don't want to do is inadvertently go backwards for the ones that have already
Right.
started charging
But I
that
think
$5.
the way it's written may be increased to an amount greater than 5, but no more than 10. So that kind of clears them up to $10 immediately, doesn't it?
But they got to get approval from the county commission for the next 5. First 5's on the county treasurer, second 5's on the county treasurer and the county commission. Representative Vaughn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just briefly, I may have just answered my own question. I just wanted to make sure this did not affect the ability for these fees to be charged for online services in addition to the in-person services.
Yeah, that's part of the change. They're going to pick up the money also on the online services.
Okay, and this amendment does not affect that.
But they don't have that ability now. So this amendment, yeah, doesn't affect their ability to do that. Correct, Chris?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So it's affecting the transaction fee, which all those changes is striking out references to facility fees and changing it to transaction fee. That's all the same. It's just the increased amount that's kind of modified as part of this amendment.
Representative Minix.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe yesterday the testimony from the Sedgwick County clerk said about $7 would make them whole and allow them to hire more people to expand their services and cut their waiting times down. So the not more than 10 would allow them to, between the commissioners and the clerk's office, to accomplish that. And I think that's a direction we need to go to give them that flexibility.
Any other comments on the amendment? Questions? Representative Vaughn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just briefly, I do appreciate the desire to bring an amendment that will pass the committee of the whole. I think I will be opposed just because Johnson County is $2.6 million in the hole, and I think $15 would have given them the flexibility to better meet that need. So I'll be opposed, but I do appreciate the intent of the amendment.
And I think Representative Vaughn, if you go back to that sheet that had the breakdowns of every county, I think you'll see that this $5 plus picking up the online ones, they'll be way ahead of whole. I could do that math real quick with you, but I think the ones that aren't going to be able to get whole out of this, and I'm not sure how much the $5 on top of this would have got them whole, would have been like Wallace County. There's some other really small counties out there that don't get whole, but the other $5 wouldn't have made most of them get whole either. But Representative Brunk.
No, I was just going to say what you just did, that the larger counties, this makes them wholly easier than the small counties. It's just the economies of scale. We get so many tags running through there that, it gives them enough money. So I was agreeing with you.
Well, and another thing that also enters into it, a lot of the big counties already did the $5 facility fee. It was the smaller ones that didn't do it because it was an uncomfortable situation for them when people came into their county courthouse that had been there for 100 years and it was called a facility fee. So anyway, Representative Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure if this is something we could clean up as part of this amendment, or I could do a separate one, but in page 4, line 2, lines 1 and 2, it says in an amount of not to exceed $5, and I think we could do in an amount not to exceed $5.
Yeah, Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You can make that amendment if you want. That's usually something that's put in by our proofing department. They like that of in there. I usually don't like to argue with them if I don't have to. So, but feel free to make the motion if you want to.
I don't need to argue. It just reads weird to me. But if that's something that we use commonly, I'm fine with it. Thank you.
Sounds like you're not the only one that struggles with that. Other comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, Representative Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, this amendment is purely so we can get something past the House floor. I think we may be able to scrap by the votes to get this. Again, we've got to do something this year. And I think this amendment gives us the best chance of passing. So with that, I'll close and move my amendment.
Okay, you've heard the motion. No, he moved it, I think. Yeah. Yep. All right. You've heard the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Motion carries. Are there any other amendments? If not, we're back on the bill. Is there any discussion on the bill? Representative Delperdang.
Thank you. And I'm just looking through this. Is there any verbiage in this, that maybe I'm just not seeing, that if we pass this and we allocate the additional funds, that there is some accountability that they will that they can come back to us or so in a year or 2 years and say, yes, we have done this, this, and this. I'm just not seeing it. Or do they get the extra money and sit on it?
Yeah, I guess we could add a reporting, something about a reporting thing.
Something where I can tell constituents later on, hey, yeah, we increased the funding, but here's what the accomplishments were.
Yeah, Chris, can you think of anything that conceptually you could do? Have them report to the House, Senate, have the Kansas Treasurers Association report.
And I'm not looking for anything real lengthy, just a few bullet items. Yes, we did this. Here's the accomplishments from getting the extra money.
Maybe we could have that by, I think a year from now is too close because of the effective dates, but it would be 2 years from, be January 10th of 2028 that they report back on the effects of the funding, success or lack of success or whatever. I'm sure we'll hear from them before then. Chris?
No, sure. I think you explained it pretty well. It'd just be kind of standard reporting language that we'd have if you wanted to the House and Senate Transportation Committees, on or before January 10th, 2028. I think you're also right on the implementation because this wouldn't go into effect July 1, 2026. From my understanding, it also maybe even any of the fee increases wouldn't take effect till January 1, 2027. So.
Are you conceptually fine with an amendment of that nature that Chris?
With your permission, I'd like to conceptually move an amendment there, but the date I'm open on.
Let's make it a presentation. See if we can make a presentation so they don't have to come up with a written report and then it winds up in one of our drawers and we never read it. Other than, well, Representative Francis doesn't read it. Representative Helgerson?
And what's the presentation going to include? Is it going to be the following counties increased the fees by blank dollars and spent the money for some purpose, or?
If I may, but I'm more concerned with not so much how much because we put the guidelines on how much the fees can increase, but to go back and say, we used to have a wait time of X and now we're down to this, or we've hired X amount of more people, therefore we've increased the efficiency of the centers. That's what I'm looking for.
We used to get X number of dollars of mill levy support, and now we're getting X number of dollars of mill levy support. Representative Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I respect my colleague and what he's trying to do here. However, I will object if it's a presentation that a committee is forced to hear. In-house, as my utilities friends here know, in-house utilities committee this year, I strongly objected to a amendment that was placed on by the Senate that would have forced the House Utilities Committee to hold a public hearing in committee in a future year. And I feel that that binds a future legislator and a future committee chair. So if that's the presentation, if the committee is forced to hear that presentation, I will oppose this just because I think that's a very bad precedent to tell a future committee chair what they have to and have not to do.
Representative, why don't you work with Chris over the next day or two? This isn't going to go real quick to the floor and floor amendment.
That's fine.
And we will look at it as friendly. I mean, I think it is good to know, what changed from the time we did this.
And I understand what the whip is referring to. I don't know if I have to respect him, but I understand it.
Yep.
So.
Well, he is opinionated. Any other discussion on the bill? Representative Vaughn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also wanted to offer conceptual amendment, unless there's opposition to that, but I did review the task of the task force, the things that they'll be doing, and I do think that technology is a really important part of this, so I just wanted to see if on point number 2, where it says make recommendations for methods to modernize such vehicle services, including improvements to fee structures and payments, if we could make it, so it'd be a comma, procedures for such services, comma, and the technology needed to administer such services.
Okay. So you made a motion?
Yeah, so I'd move that conceptual amendment.
Yep. Second by Representative Helgerson. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor of the motion say aye. All those, do you want to close?
Close.
Okay, I think we heard the ayes. All those opposed, no. Motion carries. Yeah, that's all right. That's all right. Any other discussion on the bill? If not, if there's a motion to approve this favorably, we want it to be a substitute bill because we want to get rid of that language on the personalized license plates. Representative Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that we pass out House Substitute for Senate Bill 404 favorably for passage as amended, or not as amended.
Yeah, as amended. Substitute, so it doesn't have.
Yep.
Second by Representative Van Houten. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Motion carries. All right. Committee, now we'll get on to what we were supposed to do, and I want to apologize to the members of the next bill that we're having a hearing on. That took longer than the chair thought it would, so we'll try to power through this. So thanks for your patience as we take care of this very important bill for the citizens of Kansas. So I will now open the hearing on SB 439. Chris, can you give us an overview? Oh, can you, Jessica? Jesse, give us an overview, please.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chair. Jesse, Assistant Revisor with the Revisor of Statutes Office. I staff House Utilities and Energy and then also Senate Utilities. So that is why I'm here today to brief you on Senate Bill 439. So the version in front of you is Senate Bill 439 as amended by Senate Committee of the Whole. What this bill does is it enacts quite a few new sections of law that would be cited as the Utility Railroad Crossing Act. The act provides requirements and processes for utility facilities that are proposed to be over and across or parallel to a railroad right-of-way. We call these in the bill crossings and parallelings. So the definition exactly is a crossing is an existing facility or a proposed facility that is located over, across, or under a railroad right-of-way. A paralleling is an existing facility that runs adjacent to, alongside, or within a railroad right-of-way for not more than 1 mile. It may be longer than 1 mile if the parties have agreed to that. When a utility intends to take actions on these crossing and parallelings in the public right-of-way, the utility is only required to send a notice to the railroad. And when they're taking an action on a crossing, they have 60 days to send that notice of that intended action. For the paralleling, the utility has to provide that notice within 120 days of that intended action. So when a utility intends to take action on a crossing or a paralleling located outside of the public right-of-way, the utility is required to submit a request to the railroad. So this bill then outlines that request process. There's a standard fee for crossing and paralleling. That's going to be $1,000, $1,250. And that goes to the railroad. There shall be no other fees or charges associated with that. The utility is also required to have certain insurances, policies for their actions. And in this process, if a railroad objects to this crossing or paralleling or the activities on those items, the railroad shall notify the utility to resolve that objection. So then if they cannot get to an agreement on that objection, then the bill provides a dispute resolution process that goes through the Kansas Corporation Commission. And so they file a complaint with the commission, and the commission holds a hearing, and then the resolution is then on. The bill also generally covers processes for when there may be an effect to a land value, when there needs to be emergency maintenance on a utility facility, when the railroad requests relocation of an existing utility facility, and then it also has items related to federal safety requirements. So I'm making that brief since there's so many conferees today. So with that, that's just a general overview, and I'm available for any questions on that or any specifics of the bill.
Does anybody have any questions for Jess? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to the next item. In your file, there should be a supplemental note also regarding the bill. There is a limited fiscal note attached to this. It's not the big deal. With that, we're going to start in on the proponents. And just in the interest of time, all questions will be at the end of the proponent testimony. If some of the proponents feel like they're being repetitious, let's please respect that and let us try to have some time for questions to dig into this a little bit. So with that, the first proponent that I have on the agenda is Patrick Vogelsberg with Kansas Gas Service. Patrick, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I am Patrick Vogelsberg here on behalf of Kansas Gas Service. I also wanted to introduce our Division General Counsel, Robert Vincent, who's appearing with me today. thank you for this opportunity to bring and have a hearing on this. I know your time is very valuable, so we'll just dive right into it. So what Senate Bill 439 does is it establishes a clear statewide process governing how utilities such as ours cross or parallel railroad right-of-way. The bill is designed to protect railroad safety and operations while ensuring that essential public utility infrastructure like ours can be built and maintained on time and at reasonable cost. Specifically, what this bill does, and as Jesse provided the overview for, it creates a consistent notice and approval framework. It distinguishes between work in the public right-of-way and outside the public right-of-way. It sets firm timelines so projects don't delay indefinitely. It establishes a standard and transparent crossing fee and clear insurance requirements. And this is important. It preserves the railroad's authority to object on safety and operational grounds, and we'll get into that here a little bit later on, why that's important for it to stay in the bill. So this framework mirrors laws that have been adopted in other states and reflects best practices that balances our needs to install infrastructure with the needs of railroad safety. Kansas Gas Service, we regularly cross and parallel railroad property to replace our aging infrastructure, respond to safety concerns, and expand our services to growing communities. Today, the problem is that even routine utility work that we conduct can face unpredictable delays, escalating costs, and missed construction windows, missed budgetary windows, not because of safety concerns, but due to a lack of clear standards and process for obtaining those. Jesse went through the key mechanics of the bill. What I'll do is maybe start with some of the provisions that the Senate Utilities Committee adopted in response to concerns that the opponents brought up. One of those had to deal with federal rail and rail safety compliance. This was assumed in the underlying bill, but made explicit that utilities performing work near railroad right-of-way must comply with federal rail safety laws and FRA regulations. There was also a concern that was raised by the opponents that the original 30-day notice period for both parallels and crossings was too short. The Senate Utilities Committee extended that to a 60-day notice period for crossings and a 120-day notice period for parallels. There's also, and throughout all of that, those timelines, the railroads can object on safety or operational grounds and give us an opportunity to understand what those concerns are, give us an opportunity to cure those concerns. And additionally, flagging is something that comes up from time to time as being required. There was some concerns around whether or not flaggers had the necessary federal certifications and operator qualifications. There was an amendment that put that in and made that very clear in the bill. And then also there was language that said that nothing in this act will expand, diminish, or alter the railroad's property rights in its railroad right-of-way, preserving what we feel is the railroad's property interest. So why is this needed from our perspective? I'll give you a couple examples. Number one, in regards to fees, this is an example that we ran into in Wichita. We tried to replace a gas main that was entirely within the railroad public road right-of-way at a railroad crossing. The railroad in that situation demanded either a one-time fee of $40,000 or we could pay them thousands of dollars every single year for the life of the agreement. This is essentially a toll to use public right-of-way, which ultimately drives up costs on our customers. Another issue that we have is standard, take it or leave it, one-size-fits-all permit terms. Some railroads have issued permits that can be terminated without cause and with just 30 days notice for any reason. And as you can imagine, for Kansas Gas Service, our infrastructure, we put it in place with the expectation that it is going to be used and useful for decades upon decades to come. And that sort of de facto control over our infrastructure creates some real instability for us. And then lastly, as I referenced earlier, flagging costs. We have no objection to using flaggers. We want to make sure that railroad personnel are kept safe and our own employees are kept safe when working near railroad property. We had a situation in Kansas City where we had to pay over $75,000 in flagging cost just to repair a leak in the public right-of-way. And we could not avoid these costs because we had a leak. It was urgent. We had a compliance date that we had to repair that, but we had no choice but to accept these costs. Mr. Chairman, I think I'll move a little bit further in and talk about some of the issues that come up with other states that have brought this legislation. You'll see in my testimony, I cite in the footnotes other states within the region that have adopted similar legislation for either utility crossings or telecommunications crossings. We modeled this off of Minnesota. South Dakota's law is very similar to it, but we followed Minnesota because Minnesota, there had been a challenge, a legal challenge to this in state court. And the legal challenges follow similar challenges that we see with this. It's either federal preemption or a constitutional takings challenge. And whether or not this statute like this is preempted, it goes up to the federal government and Surface Transportation Board that has authority over this. So it's the Surface Transportation Board that would be preempting any state or local regulation. And there is either per se preemption, just on its face preemption, and that's where state and local governments try to regulate or deny a railroad's ability to conduct some of its operations. The other one is where where the state or local government is trying to regulate something that is expressly already in the purview of the Surface Transportation Board. But there's a third analysis, which is as applied analysis that the STB, the Surface Transportation Board, has ruled on. And they say, and I'll quote, for routine non-conflicting uses such as non-exclusive easements for at-grade road crossings, wire crossings, sewer crossings, etc., they are not preempted so long as they would not impede rail operations or pose an undue safety risk. So those are the two key things: not impede operations or provide an undue safety risk. And that is why in the bill, you'll see it referenced at section 4H1, 4H2, and section 881, why we bring up that the railroad can object at any time for operational concerns or undue safety risk. The other one regarding takings, this has been reviewed by courts, and we have been very careful to avoid constitutional takings arguments. For the sake of time, I'll just give the reference, section 6F on page 7. This is a provision that preserves the railroad's ability to seek redress if there's been any alleged diminution of value to their property interest. If they feel that there's been any crossing that causes unique loss in land value, they maintain the ability to initiate a proceeding pursuant to our state's Eminent Domain Procedures Act. And that is something to point out. Utilities such as ours, we have the ability to pursue eminent domain, and the railroads have the ability to pursue eminent domain, and nothing in this bill changes that. In closing, I'll stop with this. We tried to work out this, Mr. Chairman. This was first brought to me by our legal team and operations and engineering in 2024. And at my advice, I advise that we meet with the railroads and try to work this out. We did. We had meetings about a year ago with Union Pacific and BNSF. The meeting One meeting that we had, I think we were advised to just call them whenever there's a problem. If anything gets stuck, just call them. Union Pacific, we met and had a series of meetings. And they were all very good. And they were more willing to sit down with us and see what all things that we have in the queue. But I think that this sort of back channeling, one-off approach, engaging lobbyists to interact with their lobbyists to deal with crossings that happen quite regularly underscores that the underlying process doesn't work. And, you know, Kansas Gas Service and One Gas, we're a sophisticated organization and have resources available to us, but recognize that not all utility providers or telecommunications providers in the state have that same ability. And so I think a statewide process is important. We have had meetings after the Senate hearing on this bill, but I think that the opponents want to maintain a non-legislative solution. And they're just, at this point, we don't believe that there is a non-legislative solution that would be workable for us. We anticipate significant need to invest in energy infrastructure. Those of you on Energy, Utilities, and Telecommunications Committee have received testimony about that.
And go ahead and kind of, we're not going to filibuster this whole thing with just the proponents.
Yep. So there's going to be great need, and there's going to be more and more work that's going to need to be required. And so I think it's important that a standardized process is there. So, Mr. Chairman, I apologize for getting lengthy, but
we're going to have to cut everybody to about 5 minutes if we're going to get through this thing or less. So thanks very much, Patrick. All right. Next on the agenda is Mike Gillespie with One Oak. Welcome to the committee. Somebody start a timer for about 4 minutes.
That'd be helpful. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my name is Michael Gillespie, Director of Government Relations for One Oak. And Patrick covered a lot, and Jesse did a great job explaining this, but I work for One Oak, and One Oak owns and operates 60,000 miles of pipe across the United States in 19 states. And in Kansas, we have 5,500 miles of pipe moving gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel, natural gas liquids, so propane, butane, ethane, natural gasoline, as well as crude oil. And in our full footprint, we crossed the railroads 1,900 times. And in that whole process, there's agreements that go back all the way to the 1930s. Some are much more recent. But we are regularly interacting with the railroads as part of infrastructure development. In the last decade, we have been building over 1,000 miles of new pipelines. So that includes crossings with the railroads. There's no way to go around the railroad if you would try to. It'd be 200, 300 miles, and at $2 million a mile to build a pipeline, that's just not economical. So you work on an agreement with the railroad to cross underneath them. And typically, we have pretty good relationships with the railroads. They move a lot of our products. We have propane that goes in our tank cars. We have rail facilities at our Hutchinson facility, our Conway facility, our facilities in Colorado and other places. So we have, and we also fuel a lot of the engines with diesel. So we're partners in that. But when we had several legislators on our right of way as we're building a new project from El Dorado to Andale and Scott City to Denver for gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel, one of the legislators asked our project manager, said, you know, which government agency is the toughest to deal with? And they said KDH&E is pretty good, KDA is pretty good, KDWP, because of the species issues from the federal level, can cause some problems, but they're pretty good. My issue is not with state agencies, it's with the railroads. There is no certainty that when we submit a permit, that we know we'll get it back in a reasonable time. And so part of this process, we had a permit sitting at a railroad for crossings for over 150 days. And there was a back and forth, a real estate person saying, hey, where's this permit? Where's the permit? And there was nothing. Eventually, I contacted lobbyists. We got it moving in 2 days. If it takes 2 days, it shouldn't take 150 or more. And so something needs to be done, something in place. And while the process of business to business is great, I call them, they call me back, and we figure something out. I won't be here forever, they won't be here forever, and something needs to be done in place. Other states have done this. And the reason other states did this was because there was a problem. It wasn't just because, well, we just think we should regulate railroads now. It's not an enjoyable thing to be opposing a railroad. But the thing is, there is a problem. I'm going to quickly go through some language because I think it's very important. There were a lot of rumors swirling around about what this bill did and didn't do. But I will tell you, this helps provide a reasonable, and the word reasonable is very important here, a reasonable approach to moving things forward. Now, other states had 30 days. Iowa had 35 days, Minnesota 35 days, North Dakota 35 days. We moved it to 60 because there was an amendment from a senator from Wichita who said, give them some more time. The railroad said 45 to 60 days normal turnaround. We can do that. We said that's good. But since I only have a minute, I'm going to go to our contract language and tell you why this is the most needed. In contract language, when our license agreements, there is termination language that more or less says they can terminate the license for failure to provide evidence of insurance or occurrence of defaults as described, but it also may be terminated by any party at any time. And then move to the next portion. The licensor this for compensation, the licensor reserves the right to implement a reasonable increase as conditions warrant. We have a project, a license agreement in Colorado, that was $80,000. And because they said, well, market prices have gone up, they have the right and they can terminate whenever they like to, it went up to $250,000 annually. That is not something reasonable. I'm a kid from Southwest Kansas, $250,000 is a big deal. And the idea that that's not reasonable. This legislation provides some reasonable parameters, and I think that we can accomplish something in the year, or in the moving forward. I know not this year, but let's give us a chance to do something that helps move Kansas forward. Thank you.
Michael, real quickly, where's the 80,000 or 200,000 or whatever in your testimony?
That's just in the license agreement, so it's actually in one of the contracts. I didn't provide the actual language of that contract, but and that's in Colorado, but it's still
important for us to have that stuff in your testimony.
Yeah.
We all know how big your companies are and
Sure.
how important you are to the economy of Kansas.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Next on the agenda is Whitney Dameron, the professional lobbyist. We know you know what 3 minutes are, Whitney.
Well, by this time, hopefully I am a professional. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Whitney Dameron, I represent Southern Star, also work with Patrick Vogelsberg with Kansas Gas. When I talked to them about the possibility of this bill last fall, they got extremely excited because of some of the challenges they've had within their primary service territory, Kansas, their biggest state, Oklahoma, and Missouri. I've cited 3 examples in my testimony that talks about some of the kinds of fees they have been forced to pay or the requests that have been made. Number 1 for getting an expedited permit, but number 2 being requested, oh, by the way, we don't know wherever you cross all of our lines, so please tell us where you cross our railroad tracks so that we can then assess you an ongoing annual fee for that as well. It's become absurd. We did have a Teams call after the hearing in the Senate, and we asked the opponents of the bill, the railroads, tell us what you don't like in the bill. We don't like any of it. Okay. Tell us you're working with these laws in at least 8 other states. We can have a conversation about timelines. We can have a conversation about fees. We can have a conversations about safety, which I think we've addressed timelines and safety. We didn't have a good conversation about the fees. And so I think that's a lot that has to do with this bill is the money. I think it's a revenue source for both the railroads and the third parties that they hire to handle these kinds of things. We've been willing to sit down and come to some kind of an accommodation that works in other states. Give us your best practices. What's your favorite state? We'll take that language and we'll have a conversation about it. To date, there's been an unwillingness to even have that kind of a conversation. And I think both Patrick and Michael have shared the concerns about having one-off conversations about we're having a problem in this jurisdiction, can lobbyists call lobbyists? The number of people signed up to testify on this bill from gas, I know the electric's very interested, the telecoms, the munis and so forth. The situation really calls for a statewide solution, a statewide framework of how this works. Then we can argue about the fees and the timelines. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Whitney. Thanks for being so concise. Next on the agenda is Communications Coalition of Kansas, Eric Sartorius. Eric, be concise. Yeah,
What's the time to beat?
you got 3.
Oh, boy, okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. They say you can learn something every day. I've learned today, don't involve yourself in the license plate world. I'm gonna say this and everybody's gonna stare at me and go, that's ridiculous. This is a simple bill. And most of the time when you hear that in committee, you're like, oh God, no, it's not. Yep, that's the look I was looking for. You should have been an actor, Mr. Chairman. This comes down to timelines and fees. Everything else really gets into being noise. I think Mr. Dameron hit it very well. Few would say this process works really well. We have tried the communication approach. That all we need is that and it'll get better. It has not. I think our folks do understand. We also get told you just don't understand how to use our forms. You don't understand how to fill out forms. I think our folks understand the process, and part of the process is once you get delayed far enough, then there's an opportunity to pay an expedited fee to have your application reviewed and expedited. So as you speak with the opponents, you may ask them how much that runs and at least a ballpark. I think something else you won't see in much testimony, very little testimony that I've been able to review, is if this is the end of the world as we know it from the railroad's perspective, how have they possibly made this work in at least 6 other states, some as long as back to 2001? Several of these have been in effect for around a decade. Some have different fees, different amounts. One is done via rules and regulations. If this was prohibiting them from conducting business and it was an ultimate threat to their existence, why are there not court case after court case throwing all these out? There's one court case that they cited that actually just remands their complaints back to the other board. Question time? Oh. Huh?
Yeah, we're going to do questions at the very end.
Oh, has a question. Okay.
I would request one thing on your testimony. Would you please give us an update? You've got a bunch of numbers, which railroad you're dealing with those issues on, and the rest of you that quoted issues, I would appreciate knowing which railroad you're having the problems with.
Absolutely.
To see if it's industry-wide or just one individual.
Sure, I was being Kansas polite.
Yep. Okay.
Not listing those.
Well, yeah.
And I would reference the two that I would reference would be the first one and the second one. The first one I put NA for the application process because we didn't ask for it. Our member didn't ask for it. It has come to them because when we talk about safety at rail crossings and railroads, the issue here was the railroad called one call. Our client, our member, marked that, and several weeks later, the contractor came out to do work. And they succeeded in installing a culvert for the railroad, and they also succeeded in tearing the copper out of our member. And in order to take care of that, it wasn't the contractor will pay for that. It is talk to our company that oversees our stuff. And so far it would be, we could pay them $5,500 for the pleasure of having our stuff ripped out of the ground, plus $2,500 annually a year. And I will stand for questions when appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Committee, we'll take questions for 4 minutes. Representative Delperdang, do you have any questions? Okay, anybody got? Representative Proctor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I'll address it to Patrick Vogelsberg, but I could address it to any of you. My question is, why just gas lines? I mean, you're not the only folks that I've heard say that they have a hard time getting the railroad to work with them. I'm waiting on a bridge for 5 years because we're still working with the railroad because the railroad goes under it. Why just pipelines?
The bill actually is fairly broad to include. If you look on page 1, section 2, sub B, facility means water, sewage, electronic telephone data, broadband, fiber optics, cable television, electric energy, oil, natural gas. So pretty broad for utility and the telecommunication industry, but we did have some conversations early on with the Department of Transportation because we understand that they have similar concerns.
Would you be opposed if we ever did work this to an amendment to add KDOT?
Absolutely not.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So over here had a question. Representative Vaughn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This could be for anyone. I'm just trying to think through how this would work out in practice. So you've all kind of mentioned situations that have arisen and different contract amounts that have come out of that situation and different timelines that were used. So I understand that this is trying to standardize that. But looking at the fee amount of $1,250 for what I'm understanding is kind of like any change to that line. I'm just wondering how you came to that amount. I mean, it seems rather low compared to some of the other contract amounts that have come up today. And then, yeah, just where does that come from? Is it from other model legislation?
It is. I think we took that specifically directly from Minnesota's statute and recognizing that I believe that statute went into effect in 2016. So if there is another reasonable amount that folks would feel comfortable with, we'd be happy to adjust that. And if you want to distinguish between regular crossings and parallels, we understand the railroads have cost. We do too, and we're willing to pay what our reasonable costs are.
Thank you. And am I understanding that that fee is for any of those types of changes? It's just the one fee?
Yeah, it's the one fee outside of already existing public right-of-way.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions? And by the way, committee, I'm sorry to do this to you. We need to kind of hang together here because we've got to allow the opponents to have an opportunity to talk, and we've ran out of time. So any other questions real quick? Good question, by the way, Representative. Okay, at this time, we'll go to proponent testimony. Representative, or no, Tom. Yeah, you make way too much money to be a representative.
Well,
Another professional lobbyist, be concise. Okay.
And I will be faster than Sartorius. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, good afternoon. I'm Tom Bruno. I will be very brief. I have a number of representatives of various railroads here to represent and answer any questions that arise about the bill. I want to point out that freight rail, Kansas railroads represent a major private investment in infrastructure. Railroads build, maintain, and expand their rail lines, yards, signals, and safety systems without taxpayer funding. So they are privately owned industrial transportation corridors used for active freight movement, and they are taxed just like any other private property owner. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to turn it over to David.
Yeah, is it David or is it Carrie? Oh, it's David. Okay. David, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, I'm David Powell. I represent BNSF Railway Company as outside counsel. With me as well is Carrie Hutchings with the railroad, who will speak as well. I'm with the law firm of Lathrop GPM. My charge is to be brief and give you a high-level summary of the legal concerns with Senate Bill 439. I'm really addressing what's called Chesterton's fence. The English writer C.K. Chesterton said, if there is a fence across a public road and you're going to remove it, you first need to understand why it is there. You can imagine the blizzard gates on I-70 in western Kansas. So I'm addressing the legal fence that exists to protect the railroads that would be dismantled partially or completely by this bill. Carrie Hutchings and the other railroad representatives are going to address why they're there and why they are needed. This bill, as has already been touched on, it will violate the takings provision in the Fifth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution and the corollary in Article 12, Section 4 of the Kansas Constitution, which requires a public purpose, a proof of need, and just compensation, which is substantially different than the fees we've been discussing. Moreover, Kansas is a quick take state. We already have a process that protects the constitutional requirements and allows utilities to acquire the rights that they need for their projects. By abandoning that structure, it implicates and violates the due process clause of the 14th Amendment by treating private property owners like the railroads differently than other property owners. It implicates the equal protection clause of the 14th Amendment. In addition, because this act specifically attacks existing contracts between the railroads and the utilities for existing installations and effectively sunsets those agreements,
It's a statute that affects contracts, and therefore it implicates the Contracts Clause of Article 1, Section 10 of the U.S. Constitution. There's been discussion that this is a model based in other states, and the Minnesota Act was given as an example. I'm not a Minnesota attorney, but if you read the plain language of the Minnesota statute and compare it with this bill, there are stark differences. The Minnesota Act has a more limited definition of public utility. It does not apply to high power voltage lines. It does not apply to large gas pipelines. The Minnesota Act also always provides that an engineering plan must be submitted, and it also provides that the railroads are to make provision for flaggers to ensure that they are railroad trained and railroad approved. And finally, the Minnesota Act has stronger provisions for allowing the railroads to impose additional requirements where they are needed for safety and the efficient operation of the railroad. As already has been mentioned, this act runs afoul of federal preemption. Congress in the ICC Termination Act preempted the field of regulations that affect railroads. It applies to the Surface Transportation Board as the preeminent authority, as well as the Federal Railroad Administration. And this act impinges upon that federal scheme that provides a uniform national approach for ensuring the safe and efficient operation of the railroads. Finally, this act violates the prior use doctrine, which has been in effect in Kansas for over a century. The prior use doctrine provides that a utility may not use its condemnation authority to substantially destroy or materially interfere with private property which has a railroad use. And this bill would affect that substantially. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I will wrap up. And as I say, this is the legal fence that would be taken away. The why it is there and why it is needed will be addressed by all of the railroad representatives who will be here before you. Thank you.
So now is Kerry Hutchins going to try to speak quickly, or are you it for BNSF?
The order I think we had was, no, Kerry Hutchins will speak shortly as well.
Shortly? Okay, be very brief.
I think our batting order was UP, the Union Pacific, and then.
Yeah, I just have only you listed for BNSF. That's why it's confusing on this end. Kerry, please be very brief. Are you Kerry? Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, members of the committee. My name is Kerry Hutchings. I'm General Director of BNSF Railway and our Corporate Real Estate Department. In the matter of expediency, I'll skip over, Mr. Chairman, some of the stats that we had that are on the record about BNSF and the impact we have on the state. But I do want to talk about the operational and safety impacts of these projects as they're being proposed. It really only takes minor deficiencies, the size of effectively a paperclip, changes to the railroad or to the wheels on a car to cause a derailment. And so we're significantly concerned about the safety aspects of any project that goes on in our right-of-way. And all of these projects present some sort of risk of derailment and risk and injury. Also, there is the opportunity for workers who are working in the right-of-way to have life-altering changes for anything that might happen to those folks that are working in the right-of-way, including our own employees who are operating trains. It also causes severe damage to property itself and what might have to be done as a result of a cleanup of a derailment. There's also the economic impacts for us. Obviously, one day of delay in trains causes potential shutdowns of automotive plants, agricultural product deliveries, refrigerated pharmaceuticals, and the like. In addition, we have our own existing utilities, our own existing overhead and trackside equipment, our rail crossing devices, bridges, and culverts. And so all of these potential projects have the potential to impact that and puts all of that existing infrastructure at risk, which is why we have the process that we have in place to try to make sure that we're not affecting any of those things, including our own infrastructure. On the transparency side for the permitting process itself, we think we have I'll speak for BNSF, we think we have a very transparent process that defines the general timelines that an applicant can expect. We have our utility accommodation policies, which outlines the things that are prohibited construction methods, where there might or might not require some additional testing. We have the call before you dig, similar to what you have to do on other people's properties, and also the flaggers, which were talked about here. So I'll close with just saying these are privately owned industrial corridors on behalf of the railroads. We maintain that at our expense, and we want to protect against any unauthorized use and access to that. And I'll say that prevention is the most important thing. So when we hear difficulties of why our processes are the way they are and why we are difficult, quote unquote, to work with, it's because we're trying to prevent any type of action or derailment or cause of life or injury. And that's why the processes are the way they are, because prevention is what's paramount for us. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you very much. Next, Jim Hild with Union Pacific. Jim, welcome to the committee.
Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Jim Hill, Director of Real Estate, Union Pacific Railroad Company. My testimony today will focus on issues with paralleling safety and timing of issuing permits, and I'll be very respectful of the time of the committee here. The bill as written provides opportunities for utilities to install or expand their facilities parallel to railroad right-of-way. These parallel encroachments would create significant safety, operational, engineering, and property rights issue. I would also note that no other state in Union Pacific's 23-state system has laws allowing or mandate such parallel utility placement. Concerns include safety conflicts. Parallel utilities would encroach upon Federal Railroad Administration required safety zones, obstruct railroad maintenance equipment, slow emergency responses to railroad incidents, and increase the risk of damaging existing railroad infrastructure, whether it be above or below ground. Maintenance interference. Railroads perform frequent maintenance, such as rail resurfacing, drainage work, and tie replacement. Parallel utilities would create excavation conflicts, restrict side dump operations, increase the risk of exposing damaging existing utility lines, and cause delays and added costs for both utilities and railroads. Railroad right-of-ways are not designed for parallel utilities.
Can I just ask, I hate to slow this up, but when I looked at the bill, it looked like they took the paralleling stuff out. Is that not correct in your interpretation of the bill?
I think the new paralleling came out. I think existing paralleling was still part of the bill.
So are you trying to do away with existing paralleling as their times come up? Is that part of the issue here?
Correct.
Okay, thank you for clearing that up for me. Sorry to interrupt you.
Railroad right-of-ways are not public right-of-way. In most cases, railroad right-of-way is fee title, privately owned property. Railroad corridors vary greatly in width, topography, drainage, and the presence of critical signal, communication, and operational systems. Long-term liability risk. Utilities placed parallel to active railroad tracks are exposed to vibration, derailment impacts, ballast disturbances, drainage changes, and frequent heavy equipment traffic. Operational delays. Parallel utilities would require constant coordination between the utility and the railroad, additional flagging, construction observation, engineering reviews, call before you dig tickets, and site visits, leading to higher cost and delays for both utilities and rail operations. The bill does not require utilities to adequately notify the railroad for access to railroad property for maintenance plans. Having utility workers out on railroad right-of-way with no approval notification to the railroad puts workers at risk and is a violation of FRA and railroad guidelines on working next to the tracks. Competitive issues and property rights concerns. Railroads transport practically every liquid and gas that pipelines transport, including but not limited to natural gas, propane, diesel fuel, jet fuel, crude oil. The bill could allow pipelines to be placed within railroads' own fee title property, and this would grant a competitive advantage to pipeline carriers and would effectively be taking away the railroad's property rights and any operational expansion potential within that parallel utility corridor. Union Pacific supports collaboration and individual project review for longitudinal utilities and utility crossings. Union Pacific manages nearly 800,000 utility agreements across our 23-state system and processes over 5,000 third-party applications annually. Our new crossing and/or maintenance on existing crossing review time is 43 days on average. 13 of those days are us waiting for applicants to deliver us information that we've asked for. Delays from this, beyond this, come from our 50% failure rate we see on applications being submitted to us. Other delays can be caused by some consulting firms who mistakenly determine that railroad right-of-way is public right-of-way, and therefore there is no need to agree to any railroad terms associated with the installation. UP is committed to working with utilities and policymakers on reasonable and safe solutions. However, the bill drastically reduces the railroad's ability to review and provide safe utility corridors. Chairman and members of the committee, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for presentation. Next, we have a virtual opponent, Laura McNichol with Watco.
Howdy,
Laura, are you
Mr.
on there?
Chairman. Can you all
Yep.
hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you. Since I'm not in the room, let me know who to Venmo my $20 to for the treasury. But seriously, thank you. I'm here today. I'm Laura McNichol with Watco. I'm a team member here. We're here to urge you to vote no for SB 439. So in our minds, this bill would create additional and burdensome regulations on the freight railroads operating here in the state. We think Kansas is a great state to do business, and as many of you know, we're headquartered in Pittsburgh, and we work safely each day to earn the right to be here. So this is why we find it enormously concerning that the legislation you guys are considering today, it ties the hands of one industry in the favor of another. You know, competitors at that. I think you heard that from previous folks. We haul and move the same commodities as the pipeline proponents, and at the heart of the matter here is safety and private property rights. In preparing these comments, I asked our permitting contractor to provide a readout of the permits that came before us in 2025. There were 40 total, and mostly were fiber lines, but not all. We had about a dozen water pipelines and one petroleum pipeline. Of those, 0 applications were denied. 7 applications were closed due to applicant inactivity. 4 were executed. Of those 4, 2 requested variances from the safety standards that we apply for all projects, which requires additional engineering review. And that stretched the average time for approval of our projects to 193 days. So we're owning that. Roughly 20 of those applications were determined incomplete and sent back to the applicant. And as of February of this year, 23 applications are in final stage of approval and 2 are near execution. So, you know, when I look at that and really tried to reflect on it, I came to the conclusion this is a bill that is a solution looking for a problem. This legislation would allow unfettered access to our private railroad property, increasing risk and endangerment of our team members, utility contractors, and the public. And you don't make rail car corridors safer by forcing access to them. Our railroads should receive just compensation for access to our land, and we should be duly compensated for the expenses associated with safely permitting utilities. Kansas would not force a farmer or any other landowner to take a pipeline at a government set price. You know, the South Kansas and Oklahoma Railroad, the SCOL, we have about 193 track miles. That equates to about 5,600 acres. Now imagine if that 5,600 acres was in sections, would this even be a bill? How is it okay to squeeze a private landowner, in this case a short line railroad, of its right to create revenue from the property it owns and maintains? You know, consistency is brought up, and consistency in my mind is unrealistic given the differences between the resources of a large class 1 railroad and a small short line. While we may have many track miles, you know, short lines are generally small businesses with little additional resources to support the permitting needs of the various utilities seeking access to our land. Fixed rates do not reflect the varying degrees at which a utility may seek access to our property, and this bill treats railroads differently than every other private landowner in Kansas. Please think about that. Each occupancy application is unique, and it creates for our short lines a burden of review and administrative processing. An application fee for a remote overhead telephone wire where no other utilities exist would be totally
Lauren.
inappropriate as the fee for a high pressure gas line. So I understand you want me to wrap up. So, you know, to close, this isn't about utilities. It's about whether Kansas believes in safety and private property rights. We respectfully ask that you vote no on the bill.
Yep.
Thank
you
you.
very much for your testimony. And by the way, I would request, I don't know if you guys have access BNSF and UP and the other railroads, if you can come up with some of that similar data that she came up about the number of applications you received, the denials, and the types of permits you get, I'd appreciate seeing that. Next on the agenda, we have Ross Lang with Kyle Railroad. Ross, 3 minutes, Kyle.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for your time. I don't want to already mentioned, so the Kyle Railroad is a Class 3 short line railroad. We move primarily agricultural products. We move rail cars for our customers and the Kansas economy. We're not in the business of permitting utility crossings and don't see that process as a revenue source. In fact, it's a cost center for our railroad. Just to build on what Laura mentioned, I think that if you took the word railroad out of this bill and you instead inserted family farm and ranch or single family home, you'd have opponents piling out of that door in front of you today. We are a private business. We operate on private land and we pay significant property taxes to the state, based on that private property valuation. We were never contacted by the proponents of this bill, I want to point out, to discuss issues with our permitting process or an example where a permitting process at the Kyle Railroad has stopped a project from happening. From a safety perspective, I want to ask the committee to think about a scenario. A farm truck becomes disabled on a public crossing. The train strikes that truck, derails, and augers into the ground and strikes a pipeline, leading to an inferno and possible loss of life. A robust review and approval process is meant to prevent that scenario. That's why we take issue with the permitting review time that's outlined in this bill. I also want to point out that within the bill, there are strict deadlines placed on the railroads, but there is no corresponding requirements on the applicants to submit timely and accurate information when the railroad raises a safety objection. So in closing, for over 100 years, railroads and utilities have successfully negotiated these crossing agreements that balance cost, safety, engineering needs, and private property rights, and that system has worked. You'll notice the opponents did not mention where a project was stopped. We think this disrupts that process, and I would respectfully urge the committee to vote no on this bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ross, for your presentation. I want to bring the committee's attention. We have a number of written-only opponents, and then we also have a number of written-only proponents. I'd like to now open it up with questions for the opponents by members of the committee, and we'll have 4 minutes for those. Representative Vaughn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This could be for any of the opponents. I think on both sides, what I'm mostly thinking about is safety. So I appreciate the concern for safety of the railroad, for safety of the railroad workers. But things that are outlined in the bill would be potential emergency situations with the utility. So being able to detect leaks, being able to make emergency repairs, things like that. So I'm just wondering, what are the current practices around emergency situations and how they're addressed with utilities?
So our current protocol for emergencies is we ask utilities to call our emergency hotline. And, the first thing that we want to make sure is are the rail operations in any danger? But then also we want to make sure that the utility is able to get out there in a very timely manner. If we have a power line down on the tracks, very dangerous for all, gas line leak. So our emergency personnel are trained to get our local workers out there, and they will flag or they will stand as a lookout as the utility completes their work.
For the record, that was Carrie Hutchings with BSNF. Any other questions for, do you have another one?
Yeah, so just to clarify, so the timeline on that you would say is it within like 24, 48 hours?
As soon as we get the call,
okay.
we're contacting our local team.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
Okay, Representative Wilborn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the opponents, my sense is listening to the testimony from the proponents, they have outlined a number of issues that they have and concerns. And from the opponents, I sense that there's no problem anywhere. So you're satisfied with the way it is now, is that correct?
Yeah, somebody come up and address that. I know everybody's excited about that one, Tom.
I'm happy to jump in there. This
Oh,
is Laura
okay, Laura.
McNichol.
Yeah, go ahead.
You know, from our perspective, we negotiate agreements annually all the time with utilities, no matter what their focus is. And we do it across the 6,800 miles that WACO operates across the country. And if you saw in my testimony, we haven't denied a permit. And we work with these companies to help them achieve their goals while we continue to support and serve our customers, especially in the state of Kansas. That would be my take on it. Again, this is a bill with a solution looking for a problem.
So do the main lines, do you guys think you're giving exemplary customer service to your competitors? Is that the way you wanted to word that, Representative?
Your choice, sir.
Yeah, Carrie.
So the question was, do we feel that the process is working? Is that our processes are working?
Excuse me, I sense the proponents sense some real problems.
Yes.
Cost, permitting, time, and I sense from you folks, it's all okay, status quo. Is that?
In my testimony, I mentioned that we do 5,000 agreements a year. We get 5,000 applications. So, you know, and our website calls out a timeline of 45 to 60 days to turn around those agreements. Now, not every one of them is going to, you know, if there's complex issues or we have to go back and forth with engineering design, it may take longer than that. But our rate of getting agreements turned around in that time period is very strong. So we feel that the process works, yes.
So when you give us your data on the number of applications and what the effect of them was, can you give us some ranges of turnaround times and like?
Put that together.
Yep, I'd like to see that. Anybody else have any questions? Am I out of time for questions? All right, committee, I apologize for running long. This is a very important issue. And I want to turn it over to Representative Delperdang for a few closing comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. How much time do I have?
You got about 3 or 4 minutes. I got to be in tax. Oh, Representative Anderson, he said 1 minute.
1 minute.
Anyway, go ahead.
I'm going to start it with Mr. Gillespie. You and I had some words in the hall the other day, and I do apologize for that. You caught me at an extremely bad time coming off the floor. Let's move on. So with that, just to recap, I want to step away from the Transportation Committee. I want to put on my chair hat for the utilities. And I've got a lot of utility members present here. But to recap it, the bill establishes a standardized process for utilities to place, maintain, operate, alter utility facilities crossing or paralleling the right-of-ways. It establishes a standard fee. We talked about that. It sets timelines for hearings and orders. It does have insurance and liability requirements, but there are railroad property rights and safety, and it also has fiscal impact for agencies, potential increase in district court cases, related fees. Counties may face some higher cost for constructing or destroying even facilities, and there will be regulatory and bookkeeping requirements. But so where are we going with this? To One Oak, Kansas Gas, Atmos, Midwest Energy, all the utilities, the telecoms, but especially the railroads. Senate Bill 439, it's a very interesting bill, and it borders between state and federal issues. I don't think anyone can deny that. I've heard from most all of the utilities on one side, and I fully comprehend, and I tell you what, to a point, I side with their frustrations. It's there. On the other side, I've heard from multiple times from the railroads representatives, and I also understand your positions over there. It's concerning your property, your right-of-ways, and your safety concerns. It's just what it is. So what do? Do we run 439, which did pass the Senate 33-5 with 2 senators not voting on it? This would legislatively force rules and regs onto the railroads, which may end up in the courts for state, federal jurisdictions, along with constitutional concerns, as we brought up during the testimony today. I've also heard from various parties to the legislation saying they would like to work through this outside of the legislative overview. That's got my attention. But I've heard from some parties that say they're not willing to come to the table. That gives me a little pause for thinking about that. Therefore, I am asking for all the parties, the utilities, the railroads, everyone Bub mentioned here, that they get together ASAP and we start working through some of the agreements this spring and this summer. If this can be accomplished, great, we move forward together. If it cannot or does not happen, I personally will file legislation in 2027, and we as a legislative body will work through these concerns. And we will make rulings based on our best efforts and our knowledge. I'm not sure if that's something you guys want to deal with. Seriously. So, but I'm willing to step it forward and I'm willing to do it. I don't know if this is acceptable to everybody, but if not, especially to the railroads, do you want me to make a motion to suspend House Rule 1308 and put a final action across today? I'm not doing that, but I don't think you want to hear that. So I am asking truly this summer, let's make it happen, or we will next year. And I don't know if I've went over my 3 minutes or not, but that's coming from the utility side of the house, and I appreciate you letting me talk.
Yep. I appreciate your work, Chairman. Anyway, all right, committee. I'm going to go ahead and close the hearing on Senate Bill 439. Again, I want to thank the committee for all of your work. I want to thank our staff for your work and taking care of us and everything. Representative O'Hobson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to thank you for your leadership on this committee. I don't know if this is our last meeting, but you've been awesome. And also to your vice chair as well, and also our ranking. Let me show some love as well. But I just wanted to thank you for your leadership on this committee. Thank you, sir.
Representative. With that, we're adjourned.